Welcome everyone to today's talk. What I'd like to speak about today is how does yoga help to create long-term transformation for individuals? So a lot of us come to a yoga practice, well, for various reasons. But what I think we can generally say is that for most of us, one of the things that we notice when we begin to practice is that during and certainly maybe a little bit of time after we've practiced, we start to feel, or we feel a bit calmer, we feel a bit peaceful, we feel a bit more present, we feel a bit more connected to our bodies, to our breath, to our minds. Now, that's a great thing that we can derive as a benefit from yoga, but the question really is, over the long term, how does this actually seep into every aspect of our life? So, for example, if we find that we're an anxious person, or we tend to have lots of negative thoughts or negative narratives going through our mind, or perhaps we have difficulties controlling our emotions or controlling our anger, or simply we just notice that we have certain repetitive habits or patterns in our lives with ourselves or in our behaviors or in our relationships that seem to just continually bring us back time and time again to the same place, which is a place that maybe we don't necessarily want to be. Now, as we've talked about in previous videos, the word that is used in Sanskrit to define or to describe, I should say, these habits and patterns is samskaras. And they are basically grooves in our subconscious mind that result from every single experience that we ever have. And they get laid down in our subconscious mind. And as a result of those grooves or those patterns, we behave according to those patterns in the current or in the present moment. Now, the practice of yoga, when undertaken correctly, and I'll explain what I mean by that in a moment, is essentially the practice of becoming aware gradually of the patterns that we have, noticing where those patterns and where those behaviors take us. So, for example, we get into a particular conversation with someone, or we get into a particular situation with someone, and for whatever reason, we always seem to find that we get angry quickly, or we lose our patience, or we get over emotional, or we just respond in a way that doesn't necessarily, if we were standing back from the situation, help to make progress in that area of our lives or in terms of that particular relationship. So we begin to become more aware and we notice our patterns, and we do this just by noticing simply the way that we move and the way that we breathe on the mat in our asana practice. One of the things that may resonate is with a lot of people is the fact that when we practice, we're always pushing ourselves so hard. We're always looking for the most intense posture. We're always looking to maybe hold the posture for as long as we possibly can, even if it's at the detriment of our mental and breath stability, which, as we know, are so important in our yoga practice. So those might be patterns that then play out in different areas of our lives, that seeking intensity, that need to always be creating more or doing more or having more, whatever it might be. So we just start to notice that these patterns are there. Now, when we come onto the mat, what I meant by a correct yoga practice is one that recognizes the patterns that we have and seeks to allow us to practice in a way that creates what you might call counter samskaras, or counter patterns, or more beneficial patterns that will take us gradually, slowly, moment by moment in a different direction. So a classic one is the fact that a lot of us in today's world tend to move and do at pace. We're very, very quick with our words, we're very, very quick with our actions, and we always seem to be rushing. And for various reasons, which I won't go into fully now, I think we can all possibly agree at a high level that rushing the whole time is not necessarily a good idea. In terms of the efficiency of our actions, it's bound in some way to have a negative impact on them, because if we're rushing, we're not necessarily paying attention. If we're rushing in our interactions with other beings, we can come off as being too fast or being rude or being brutish in terms of the way that we respond. And so therefore we don't necessarily get to access a more compassionate tone of speech that we might have with someone else. And physiologically, rushing all the time creates a set of unwanted circumstances in our body, such as the release of certain hormones and chemicals, high blood pressure, high heart rate, and other such things. So we can see that across a number of these areas, rushing or being quick is not a great idea. So for that person, the correct yoga practice would be one that slowly starts to create these new samskaras of slowing down. So allowing them to breathe more slowly and cultivating that as a practice, seeing if we can cultivate moving more slowly and cultivating that as a practice, beginning to notice what happens to our internal systems, to our breath, to our heart rate, feelings of tension and stress in the body as we begin to slow down in our practice. And then gradually over time, as we revisit our mat on a regular basis, and we continue to try to work on developing this new pattern, we become more and more familiar with the benefits of slowing down, both psychologically and physiologically. As a result of that, when we come off the mat, we begin to notice the difference between the calm, slower state that we manage to induce or practice on the mat and the fact that actually the way we feel or act or behave in the rest of our lives is so untethered from that experience that we have on the mat. And that then brings about an awareness that, oh, actually, hang on a minute, maybe I can now start to actually bring some of that slowness that I've been practicing on the mat into my day-to-day life and just experiment with how that feels. And this generally will arise naturally through practice and through awareness of existing patterns and having an understanding of the new patterns that then need to be added in order to take us in a different direction. Then gradually all of the limbs of yoga, at least in terms of the practice, such as breath work or pranayama or meditation, are all simply helping us to a certain stage, at least, of practice to create these new tendencies, to create these new patterns. So even, for example, if you're someone that gets quite irritable or agitated or finds it quite difficult to sit still, simply the act after perhaps having done some movement of trying to sit still for 5 or 10 minutes in meditation or to do some breath work is a huge, huge practice in laying down a new pattern, because it's simply saying to the body or actually to the mind, look, I know that during this practice you're going to try to distract me. I know that in this practice you're going to give me some narrative or some thoughts that said actually you should get up or you should move your arm or you should fidget with your toes or your fingers or whatever, or you need to scratch or whatever it might be. But for the duration of my practice, be it 5, 10, 15 minutes, whatever it is, I'm just going to see if I can just let go of having to react to that mental pattern or that mental narrative. And I'm just going to see if I can sit still. And gradually over time, that becomes more and more easy. And as that becomes easier, it becomes more ingrained as a pattern within us. And therefore, in our day-to-day lives, we are able to embrace and bring into our daily actions and activities those things that we have been practicing on the mat. But the key thing that I said is the correct practice. And what that means, just to reiterate, is maybe on your own or with the help of someone, beginning to recognize the patterns within and knowing the types of practices that literally act as counterbalancing practices or counterposes, if you like, to those tendencies and to those patterns. And then over the long term, by practicing in this way, by bringing in mantras and chants that align with the new patterns that one wishes to develop, by using visualizations that again align with the new patterns that we wish to develop, and also feeling states that help us to move or cultivate feeling states that we feel would be more beneficial for us, gradually those start to become more and more dominant as patterns in our subconscious. And therefore, as a result of that, they help to change our behavior in the present, in the now. And as a result of that, maybe new things arise, new insights arise, new connections are made, relationships shift and change accordingly. So that is why the long-term regular practice of yoga in the way that I've described can be so, so beneficial in terms of helping to create self-transformation. So reflect on that. Just have a think maybe about the way in which you're practicing and whether you think it's helping you to move in the direction that we've just described in this session today. So thank you for joining as always. Please do subscribe to the channel if you like the content and give us a like if you particularly enjoyed this video. Good to see you all. Take care. Namaste.